Oh, shit, the show's starting. Oh, no. Oh, God. I wasn't ready.
He's Derek.
I know many of you are whores, and you have been on more laps than a napkin.
She's Romaine.
Oh, here's my titty, touching another chicken titty. Whoop, whoop.
This is Derek and Romaine.
2.0, bitches.
Titty. Chicken titties. Let me tell you something. You might think this won't be a fun and sexy episode of our show.
What?
When I say the words sociologists are our guests on today's show. But actually...
You'd be wrong.
You would be so wrong.
Yeah.
This is so much fun. We spoke recently with the authors, they're actually editors, of a new book, Unsafe Words, Queering Consent in the Me Too Era, Shanetl and Trevor. And we just had an absolute ball with them. They are super fun, as you will hear in just a few moments. We had just an absolute blast with them, talking about queer identity and sex and all that kind of stuff. And super engaging, engrossing, laughs, tears. We had all the emotions.
Oh, we really did.
We really did.
They're a super fun interview. I can't wait for everyone to hear it.
Yeah. And I love the whole thing. So I think you will enjoy it too. So you might think, why are Derek and Romaine talking to sociologists? Well, you know what? We are trying to keep things fresh around here. Quote unquote fresh. And, talk to different people, different points of view, different perspectives. Expand your mind and not just your thighs. Thank you. Although there's a certain amount of that goes on too. But no slut shaming here on the show. So we are recording the show in advance. You know, we do our live show 5 days a week.
Yep.
At dnrstudios.com. But sometimes we need to take time off. We got to go on cruises and what have you. Also, we have a free podcast. So if you are a subscriber, but you want to encourage your friends to listen to our show, you can direct them to our free podcast so they can get a taste of what the show is like.
Yes.
But the free podcast frequently is just interviews and a little bit of evergreen content. And so this time around, though, I thought we should give people a little bit more of a taste of what our live daily show is like, where we discuss the topics of the day and what is on our mind. And those of you who are regular listeners of our live daily show, don't worry. Romaine will not spend 10 minutes complaining about her wife on this episode.
Are you sure?
Well, I mean, it needs to be an evergreen complaint. So I guess it would need to be the same complaint you have about her every day.
Okay.
All right. But since it is a new year and we pull topics for the show every day, and as I bring in new topics on my list, I push down older topics in my list, and then they drop off the main page that I have them on, and they get to another page. And by the end of a year, I have 3 pages of topics that we never got to. So I thought it would be fun to look at some of the stories we didn't cover in 2022 and cover them here now, because some of them were good. We could have covered them, but we ran out of time talking about how Romaine's wife is such a disappointment to her. All right. But I did actually want to kick things off with a story we didn't get to last year, but has a more recent update to it.
Oh, okay.
So many years ago, and by many, I mean 2008, a man, I'm going to mess up his last name, but his name is Nicholas Oliverdian, and he was accused of sexual assault in more than one case, but going all the way back to 2008 in Utah. He disappeared. They were trying to serve him. He missed his court date, whatever.
Okay.
He's missing. He's in the wind.
All right.
And he was in the wind for quite some time.
Okay.
Until COVID hit.
Oh.
And in 2021, a man presented at a hospital in Scotland with symptoms of COVID, and a fingerprint match, even though he was using a different name, a fingerprint match matched him to this fugitive from the United States who apparently had been living in Scotland scot-free for several years. Now he is facing extradition on these sexual assault charges.
Why did they fingerprint him at the hospital?
Well, they have a public healthcare system. And so I think they were checking to see if he was in their system because he gave them a name.
Right.
And it turned out that it was a phony name.
So COVID really cost this guy.
Yes.
Dang.
But they were able to tell it was him because of the tattoos that he had on his arm. Again, another reason, if you get tattoos, don't do porn. People will be able to tell it's you. Don't sexually assault people, fly off to another country, and then get COVID.
Right.
Because they're going to find you with your identifiable tattoos.
Dang.
Anyway, now he's facing extradition, but he is being held at a prison in the UK while he is awaiting the actual process of leaving the country. And he has asked the judge through his most recent lawyer, I guess. He's already cycled through something like 8 different lawyers.
Wow.
But he is requesting that the judge free him because he is being taunted by the other inmates at the prison where he is being held, that apparently when he walks by, all the prisoners burst out in leaving on a jet plane. Don't know when.
Wow.
I'll be back again.
Wow. I mean, that's mean, but...
Mean? But this guy seems, everyone's innocent until proven guilty, but he seems pretty terrible.
Yeah, he does.
By this. So anyway, so that was more recently in January. There was an update on the case that he's being taunted by prisoners with a John Denver song.
Wow.
I know. But this could go on for a while.
Yeah.
I just feel bad for the victims in this case who have been waiting a long fucking time for justice, going all the way back to 2008. And apparently they have linked him to other crimes since then and have been leveling even more charges on him. But as we saw
so he is not a good man.
Well, what we also saw in the Sam Brinkman case, where they threw a bunch of charges at him when they were extraditing him to the United States, that I learned from watching MSNBC, that if you extradite someone, for trial, you can only charge them with the crimes you have extradited them. You've mentioned in the extradition.
Oh, so you put anything you suspect them of.
So
basically.
even if you're not actually going to have them go to trial on it, you can't layer other charges on once they've been extradited. And this is because governments need to make a decision of whether or not to extradite somebody based on the charges that they are facing. Because you can't say, oh, we need to extradite them for shoplifting. Then when they get here, go, we're charging them with murder and we're going to put them to death. Because if the country doesn't believe in the death penalty, they want to be able to spare a person's life. So you have to only charge them with what would be on the extradition document. So I think U.S. prosecutors now are adding other charges of cases that they may also bring. Maybe the evidence is lighter there, so it might not actually go to trial.
Why did this guy go to a non-extradition country?
I don't know. I don't know why he ended up in Scotland, and I don't know where he was in between. But, people fake their own deaths and disappear all the time. Remember when I moved from Los Angeles to Michigan and my friends accused me of faking my own death?
Yes.
So it's not hard. You move away from where people are. If they don't see you anymore, you stop updating your Facebook page. It's like you're dead.
Wow. I mean, you're not wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Well, that's a crazy story.
I told you we didn't get to it last year, and now we are. And see, it could have made the list, but we had so many, as you know from listening to our show every day, we cover so many amazing things on our show.
Wow. Yeah.
Sometimes a juicy story just falls through the cracks.
Well, here's something I want to know, Derek.
Oh, God.
That's on your list of topics.
Pop quiz. I hope I remember the details.
Sound is slower on Mars.
Yes.
How and why?
Great. I'm glad you asked this question.
I know. I thought I'm going to quiz you on science because I want to know why sound moves slower in one place than another. That doesn't make... Is it maybe because it's not as dense? But I would think it would move faster. Anyway, I don't know.
It's because it's cold. apparently temperature makes a difference in how long it takes for sound to get to you. And Mars is significantly colder than Earth,
So
and
sound
so
moves slower.
it takes longer for sound to get to you.
So does everyone sound like this?
I think the real problem.
On
Okay.
Mars.
Listen, Dory. I don't have time for your fish level shenanigans on today's show.
I'm just asking.
I think in this case, where it would be a problem is if you were watching like a movie from some kind of distance where the audio and the picture would be out of sync with each other. Because like many years ago, they do things in Los Angeles at the Hollywood Bowl, which is a big outdoor venue.
Right.
Huge. And sometimes they'll do, movies under the stars with the orchestra playing along with the movie. So sometimes with a movie musical, they'll have a thing. And so many years ago, I went for their Movies Under the Stars thing, and they did Singing in the Rain.
Okay.
And we were way in the back. I think it holds 12,000 people or something insane. It's a huge outdoor amphitheater.
Sure.
And we were sitting way in the back, section X for excellent seating. And we were watching the movie Singing in the Rain. And for those of you who've never seen it, it's a great classic movie.
Yeah.
From 1952. And it is about the transition in Hollywood from silent film to sound. And one of the early problems with sound film is that sometimes the sound, because it was on a record separate from the film itself, sometimes the sound would come out of sync with the movie.
Oh, yeah, that's a real problem.
Right. Well, the movie would get stuck or the record would skip, and then it would be out of sync. And the people sitting in the theater, all of a sudden, the lips would be moving, but the sound would not match the lips.
Which is real annoying.
It is. But if you sit far enough back at the Hollywood Bowl, the difference between the speed of light and the speed of sound on Earth is enough that it is slightly out of sync that far back.
Wow.
So on Mars, you probably would not be watching a movie that far away because, they don't have an atmosphere. But if you were, it would be really out of sync or be out of sync even closer in that situation.
Or if you were watching the Rihanna halftime show, it might look in sync.
Maybe she should have brought In Sync on stage
Maybe
with
she
her.
Should have. Maybe she should have. Okay, well, that was one of the ones I wanted to ask.
See, you
about.
learned something.
I did. Now I know. Cold makes sound move slower.
And let's talk about passwords.
Oh, yeah.
The password is...
I hate passwords. I'm just going to start by saying I hate passwords. I hate everything about them. I hate that you have to change them so much, and then you can't use the same password for everything, so then you have to remember 900 passwords. I'm just going to say I hate passwords more than life itself, and they make me really angry, and every year they get more and more complicated. You have to have a lowercase. You have to have an uppercase. You have to have a special character. You have to have a number. You have to have a tattoo on your ass. Like, it's everything. There are all these crazy rules. It's got to be 8 letters. Now it's got to be 37 letters. Like, Jesus, fuck me.
It is a lot. Well, the good news is that they are looking at doing away with passwords because they are highly insecure, and it is a problem. But, they would like to replace it with other things.
Like?
Well, a lot of apps on your phone now use your face or your thumbprint to get in. But as we have seen from these property crimes that were happening in New York last year that we did talk about on the show, that people were being drugged in bars, and then while they were unconscious, their face or thumb was used to unlock their phone, and then their accounts were drained of money.
Right.
Because all they needed was your face or your thumb in order to get into your stuff. So no matter how secure something might be, like tied to you as a person...
And
the reality is
authentication. Ugh.
Right.
Makes me crazy.
Somebody can get around it anyway.
Yeah.
So they've got to work on it. But based on hacking, in another story from last year, these are the most common passwords because, there's hacker dumps will happen and you'll see all these passwords will fall out all over the place. And so if these are any of your passwords,
All right, let's hear them.
Or some combination of
Let
them.
me guess. I'm not even looking, but I'm
Okay.
going to guess. One of them is password.
That is correct.
In fact, I think that's the number one
I
password.
believe that password is the number one password that
Okay.
people use.
I
Yes.
am going to also guess that the number 2 one is like your name and your birth date.
No. That is
okay.
not one of the ones that is listed.
Okay.
But that would be a terrible password
Sure would.
because all they'd need to do is know your name and your birth date.
Yes.
And they would be able to get in there.
Yes. Okay. So it's none of those things. Then, what other dumb things do people put as passwords? Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Like just numerous.
Yes. So a number set is one of them.
Yes.
So
Yep.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or
Yep. Yep,
up
yep.
to that.
Okay.
Yes, that is one of them. The word password is one of them. The word default apparently is one of them.
default.
Yeah.
That's an interesting one.
Queerty, QWERTY,
Oh, that's because it's like the line on the phone, or on
Right.
your computer, or your
on the keyboard.
yeah.
Yes, all the way across the keyboard. And then I love you.
gross.
I agree.
By the way, I've never used any of these.
I have never used any of these too.
Yeah.
So I feel good.
I feel like my choices are strong.
Right.
Yeah.
But then again, I worked at Sony Pictures and North Korea hacked Sony Pictures and my shit got dumped out there anyway. So even when I was not doing anything wrong,
Yeah.
Sony Pictures fucked me over.
Sometimes I'll make a password that's like Romy ate 22 cupcakes.
So it's based on real life.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'll try to do. Sometimes I'll do stuff like that.
Many years ago, when I was a kid,
Yeah.
I think I can say this now because I don't think my mother is still doing this. But anyway, when ATMs first started,
Mm-hmm.
and my mother needed to remember her ATM PIN code,
Oh, God.
she put it in her address book as a phone number for a person that was not a real person.
Oh, that's smart.
So the bank had the ATM was called Versateller. So my mom put a name in her phone, Vera Stellar,
Okay, that's
and the last 4 digits of the phone number were her PIN code.
That's smart.
So when she couldn't remember it, because back then you weren't going to the ATM all the time, I guess. You weren't memorizing other things. But, so that way,
Yeah.
all she had to do was like pull out her address book and
See,
Vera Stellar was in
I
there.
come up with a 4-letter word.
Okay.
And
Like a
that,
mnemonic.
So maybe the word is glad.
Okay.
And whatever the letters and the numbers match up to write out the word glad, that's my PIN number. Or it could be any fucking work could be it. It could be any 4-letter word. And then I just have to remember the word. And then I can figure out the numbers.
I use for pins, for 4-digit pins, I use numbers from my past in the pre-digital age.
Oh, I've done that too.
So it is not a guessable number because it's not related to, where I live now or where I work now.
So
It would be so far in the past that there'd be no digital record. So it would be virtually impossible to guess.
So like one I used, I don't use it anymore, obviously, but one I used to use was 2287 because that was my phone number growing up. 2287.
Right? Well, didn't you live in a town where that was all you needed to call
I
anyone?
Sure did. You only needed 4 digits.
Ugh, terrible small town Romaine Patterson.
9219. That was my best friend Kendra's number. By the way, I still think that's her family's phone number.
Not anymore.
No, actually, I think it still is their phone number.
Oh, God. Why are you giving this out?
You still, because nowadays you can't dial 4 digits anymore and get to them. You have to have the rest of the digits. So you have to find out the rest of the digits that go before all that.
All right. Well, before we go to our interview, I do want to wrap up on something that we talked about on the show in the past, and I have an exciting follow-up on.
Okay.
Okay. So, one of my favorite things one of my favorite quotes that I use over and over too much is my mother lives in Hackensack from Superman.
Yep.
God bless you, Valerie Perrine. Anyway, all the time, anytime I see anything in New Jersey, anything bad happens in New Jersey. But my mother lives in Hackensack. My mother has actually never lived in Hackensack, but I say it all the time.
You do.
Now, I had remembered that when she says, my mother lives in Hackensack, that Lex Luthor says, not anymore.
Yeah, that's what he says.
But he doesn't, because I recently watched the Superman movie, and Lex Luthor just shakes his head and walks away. He doesn't say anything. He has no line.
Are you sure?
I just watched it recently. But then, here's the real twist. Now you'll know how my brain works. More recently, last night, but we pre-recorded this, so God only knows when this was. Recently, I was rewatching Silence of the Lambs, which is an incredible movie. Like, one of the best pictures that is actually probably really the best picture of the year. All right. So I'm watching Silence of the Lambs. And Clarice Starling is talking to Hannibal Lecter. And she says something about something. And Hannibal Lecter says, not anymore. And I was like, oh my God, I have conflated these two things. The not anymore line is Hannibal Lecter from Silence of the Lambs. It is not Lex Luthor from Superman. I can't remember what Clarice Starling says it, but as soon as he said not anymore, I was like, oh my God, this is where this came from. By the way, that movie is still good. It's still so fucking good. You know what is actually really great about it? Because you know my kink is movies where women are good at their jobs. Anyway, I love that in a movie. That's what I want. All entertainment. I just like women who are good at their jobs.
Okay.
They're appreciated. They're underappreciated. Whatever. I just like watching things where women are good at their jobs. Okay. So anyway, Jodie Foster's character in Silence of the Lambs, she's a FBI trainee, and she has to go toe-to-toe with a notorious serial killer.
Right.
Hannibal Lecter. And she's a very smart, capable person, but she's also an FBI junior trainee. And what I do like about the way that the movie portrays her is she clearly is smart. She's clearly on her way to being a great FBI agent.
Right.
But she's also not there yet.
Yeah.
And so sometimes in movies, I'm thinking about, say, Eraser, when at the end her heel breaks and she drops the gun and the gun slides into the bad guy's hand. Sometimes women do things in movies where you think, this is boneheaded. They're only doing this. She seemed so strong. And now all of a sudden, oh no, I broke a nail and now I'm helpless. Bullshit. But what I do like about Silence of the Lambs is Jodie Foster's character never has anything like that. But she does get over her head more than once in the movie.
Sure.
She does eventually work her way out of it. But this is no like superhero,
right.
This is not Die Hard, where all of a sudden she's climbing around through things and blowing things up and way more skilled than you could have possibly imagined. She is, she's remembering her FBI training. She's getting into trouble. She's remembering her training, and the training is kicking in, and she's doing a good job. But she clearly is out of her depth on more than one occasion. Anyway, so it is what I like about the movie is that she never does anything stupid, but she definitely gets in jams where she's got to get herself out of it. And there's no clear, like, I'm confident and I know how to get myself out of this kind of stuff. Anyway, but she doesn't make stupid mistakes. Except maybe opening up to Hannibal Lecter. But then again, I think that ultimately works to her advantage. But they do warn her, don't do that, because he'll get in your head. But he gets in there and then he likes what he sees.
It's true.
Anyway, so there you go. I have solved a movie mystery. Not anymore is from Silence of the Lambs, not Superman.
Well, I feel smarter now. This show is making me smarter, Derek.
Well, if you feel smart now, I can't even fucking talk. It's a good thing we're wrapping this part up. Then you will enjoy our conversation with Shanetl and Trevor talking about unsafe words right after this.
More Derek and Romaine next.
Derek here, along with Romaine, and joining us now by phone from two separate locations. It was very exciting getting everybody connected, but we did it. We have our party line together. Technology has worked for us. Shanetl Gabrieal Buggs is with us. She is an associate professor, a sociologist, and she has a PhD, so we will be calling her doctor.
Doctor.
And Trevor Hoppe is with us. He is also a sociologist and an associate professor, and they are both the editors of the new book, Unsafe Words, Queering Consent in the Me Too Era, and it is available everywhere fine books are sold as of February 10th. Both of them are on Twitter. Shanetl is SG Bugs with 2 G's at the end on Twitter, and Trevor is Trevor Hoppe, Hoppe. Welcome to the show for both of you.
Hello.
Thank you.
It's nice to have you with us.
What an introduction.
I know, it's a lot.
Yeah.
I try to get everything out at the beginning.
All the important stuff.
All the important stuff out at the beginning. And our show is filthy and loose. And so I'm sure that some of our listeners are in a panic that we are having a conversation with 2 sociologists. But I thought I would open things up with some personalizing questions for the 2 of you. And then we will get into your new book and your work. So the first question, Shanetl, to you. In your Twitter bio, you say you are a killjoy. Please explain thyself.
Okay, so the feminist killjoy comes from one of my favorite writers, Sarah Ahmed. And so she talks about the feminist killjoy, but I suppose you could be any kind of killjoy. You could be a queer killjoy, I'm sure.
That's fun.
Where basically you take everybody else's fun out of their bigotry when you're like at home for, like Thanksgiving dinner.
Okay.
So basically when you're calling other people out on their shit and you're ruining their fun, you're a killjoy.
Okay.
And so I actually have.
So Derek, you're basically Derek. Got it. Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
We are kindred
And so
killjoy spirits, yes.
Yeah.
I have it tattooed on my middle fingers, if that gives you.
Wow. I love that. Okay.
So you take pride in your killjoyness. Got it. All right.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, good. And then you are also a TV junkie. So please let us know one guilty pleasure TV show for you.
Oh, guilty pleasure. Oh. So, I mean, it's probably going to be one of those ridiculous dating offerings that are on Netflix where it's just heterosexuals being complete shit shows.
Please tell me you watch Love Island.
So that's the one I haven't watched.
Okay, can I make a recommendation?
It's on my to-do list. It's on my to-do list because I've read
All right.
stuff about it.
I'm going to help
this
make
is
your life
messy.
better. Start with the UK version in the early.
Which I've heard is better. I've heard it's better.
It's way better. And the early seasons, like season 1, 2, 3. Oh, they're so good.
Okay, remind me. Is Love Island? That's not the one where you have to find your soulmate, and
So,
they did
It's
they
one of
did
the.
one with they did one with bisexuals, I think, one season or something.
No, it's not like that. This one, you go on the show, they couple you up with another
Okay.
person, and then basically you have an opportunity to recouple many, many times, and it gets real, real messy and real, real incestuous and real dramatic.
Okay, so
it's
it
good.
definitely feels like I love the messiness of Too Hot to Handle.
Yeah.
because
Mm-hmm.
it's
I'm going to tell you because
So-
that's a guilty pleasure for me. So I'm telling you, you will love Love Island. If you like Too Hot to Handle, Love Island is so much better.
Okay, I love this.
Yeah.
This is
Mhm,
fantastic.
mhm.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're
Okay.
welcome. And by the way, those UK folks are not afraid to have sex in the house. And wow. That's all I'm going to say. They get real, real creative sometimes.
It's really interesting seeing reality TV British people versus I think the stereotype of British people being so buttoned up.
Yeah. Not on Love
and
Island.
yeah. So
I actually have to imagine that there's another layer of fun to watching these kinds of dating shows as a sociologist, because so many of these reality shows, especially the competition shows or the dating shows, they are built to torture everyone psychologically in some way, for our own entertainment. So as a sociologist, you must watch some of these shows and just think, oh, what PhD student put this terrible mess together? Because all the elements are here.
Actually, it was not put together by anybody who has any understanding of science. I actually wrote an opinion piece about Love is Blind, literally arguing this. Like, there's nothing scientific about this. They want to do the pseudoscience of this experiment. It's not an experiment. Like, this isn't science. So this is also just like, I could go on whole rants. So, I'm definitely entertained, but, it is hard to 100% turn the sociology brain off, especially as someone who literally studies online dating. So, I'm definitely I like to go on a very extensive Twitter rant, and I'll live tweet all of my analysis.
Oh my God, I love it
All
so
right.
much.
Well, Shanetl, we've been leaving Trevor in the weeds for a while, but remind me later.
sorry,
I have
Trevor.
to tell you my story about hidden lesbians on AOL. Anyway, but before, you're gonna love it. Okay, so Trevor, same thing for you. Because you did not say you were a TV junkie, but I would like to know what your TV guilty pleasure is.
Oh my gosh. I watched everything. Oh, what have I been watching that's trashy and good? I'm trying to think about. I just watched this show called Riviera, which is these in season 3 it becomes this art restoration spy thriller trashy starring what's her name from the 1990s? Julia Stiles, and she plays this badass billionaire woman who's just going around the world killing Nazis and stuff. And
okay.
This sounds interesting, Trevor. You've piqued my interest.
You have. It doesn't sound trashy at all. It sounds delightful. And then I need to ask you about your dog.
My dog?
Oh, I'm sorry, your cat. You have a cat.
Yes. I was
I have a dog. Shanetl has a dog.
Okay.
Shanetl has a dog. Trevor has a cat.
My note here is is about Trevor's cat. Please tell everyone who your cat is named after and why.
Oh, yeah. Nomi, named after the only movie character that matters, Nomi Malone from the movie Showgirls, which I am quite a fan of. And she's geriatric now, but she's still shaking her tail.
Okay, that might be the gayest thing I've ever heard. But also awesome.
Okay, good. Well, I love that we have learned a bit about the two of you, and now I would like to find out about the book that you have that the two of you work together to edit, Unsafe Words, available everywhere, February 10th. So tell us a bit about the book and sort of the genesis behind it.
Yeah, do you want to start, Shanetl?
Again, Trevor?
Sure.
Okay, what is our dance that we're doing for this? Okay, so we're sociologists, so we do research for a living. So I don't personally do much research on sexual violence. I've mentioned that I study online dating and I talk to people about their dating experiences, and so either the fear of being assaulted or actual experiences with assault certainly have come up in that work. But it's not the primary focus of the work. And then I'm also coming into thinking about sexual violence from kind of an organizing background. So I've been doing organizing workshops, various other kinds of initiatives within academic spaces to be concerned with issues of sexual violence among academics. So I think that was kind of my entree into thinking about, let's have a conversation about Me Too and where queer people fit in and kind of what that looks like. And I will say, I think Trevor was having other conversations, and then Trevor came and had a conversation with me, and we were like, yes, let's do this. I don't know if that's accurate.
I would just add, as a queer person having sex in the world, I noticed that all the conversations happening about consent in the wake of Me Too were very focused on rich white people, straight people, like Harvey Weinstein and Alyssa Milano, et cetera. And I just knew that there were conversations about having consent in queer spaces that were totally different. And the way we do sex and do consent does not look like the kind of conversations about consent that were coming out of Me Too, which were very focused on kind of this model of enthusiastic consent, which is sometimes described as like, you know, getting explicit permission verbally to do each and everything that is done. And yeah, that just does not happen in a lot of queer spaces.
No.
And yet we still do consent, right? Like consent still happens. It can happen. It just doesn't have to look like that. So I thought we need a kind of like different conversation centered on queer people to kind of understand other ways to do this that fit different communities better.
So,
Yeah.
a lot.
Well, I was just going to add on to that.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Don't want to talk over you. But I mean, I think part of the thing too with the kind of broader discourse is, I mean, obviously it's not just, you know, not really understanding queer people, but I think it also didn't really understand the ways that being different kinds of embodiments, particularly being non-white or fat or any of these other kinds of things, like are also going to shape how you are navigating these issues around sexual violence or harassment, and even consent. So there's a lot of things I think that were lost in the kind of whitewashing it away from Tarana Burke's original, you know, kind of vision, that, you know, was not only, I think, to the disadvantage of just queer people who were like, we're not doing sex that way. So like, what is this?
So this issue of consent is fascinating within the queer community, because when I think about it, I think like lesbians, I feel like overprocess everything. And so I feel like there's so much consent there that it's ridiculous. But gay guys, I feel like there's very little consent given, in particular with the way
or
that
requested
or
asked.
yeah. Because I think about like the way gay men often shake hands with a hand on a cock or an ass or some other party part, but also the way that gay men touch straight or lesbians' bodies, like straight ladies, like women's bodies.
Yeah.
Gay men and the way they interact with women's bodies. I can tell you, I have been manhandled by more gay men than straight men or even lesbians,
And
for
she's
that
pointing
matter.
directly at
and
me
I
right
am,
now.
because he constantly is like,
I'm
tweet,
constantly
tweet with my boobs.
I'm constantly poking her. It's true.
Yeah.
That is true.
Like
I mean, I'm like, so you'll really like my chapter then. You know, so I mean, I'm bi, but you know, so I guess I'm navigating both sides of the table
Sure.
here, I guess. So, I mean, I won't say that I don't think women haven't touched me a lot. They have. Straight women, queer women, a lot of women have touched me. But to your point about gay men, I mean, you know, I open up my chapter talking about this time I was in a gay club in New York, and this gay guy I was dancing with was like, I don't fuck women, but I'd fuck you.
Oh.
Oh.
It was just like, you know, and it was just like the power of the ass. Fantastic. You know, I felt accomplished in that moment. Like, I have an ass that turns out gay men come through. But you know, it's so. I mean, that's always been my experience. I think, especially in gay bars.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I definitely, you know, I'm a thick girl, I'm a curvy girl, and they love to touch some titties.
Touch the titties. They are always on your titties. They put their face in your titties.
They're so fascinated by, especially big ones.
Yeah, it's true, because I have big titties too, so I totally get that. And I'm always fascinated by how gay men just think they can put their hands all over your titties, and it's like, dude, what are you doing?
So,
yeah.
Go ahead,
I
Trevor.
think you raised the point. Well, I was going to say, I think you raised the point that queer people aren't perfect, right? And
Sure.
part of the book is about how we're not and how we could do better. So, yes, we do things like differently, and that can be good. But, of course, also we got our own skeletons in the closet that we need to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, I do wonder about this because I think a gay male-focused bar is actually kind of a perfect place to use as an example here in this, because I think we have all been in a gay bar situation where it's a live fire zone of sexual harassment. And, you know, I mean, we've talked about a lot about the difference between like a straight strip club and a gay bar with strippers, and how, with the women, like, you cannot touch them. If you do not have like a fistful of $20 bills in your hand, they will not even look in your direction, versus a gay bar where a single dollar, you can really aggressively sexually harass a man for $1. And it is shocking what people think they can get away with for a single dollar. So,
I mean, for $1, for a drink.
Yeah.
I mean, I was in Mexico in a gay bar, and all I did was dance with them. And the next thing I knew, I turned around and they were like putting their heads next to my ass and taking pictures.
Yeah, I mean, it is how wonderful. It's global. It's totally international. It's the universal language of sexual harassment in a gay bar. So, but I wonder about this because certainly a lot of the Me Too conversation has been about sort of workplace power dynamic situations. And, and in some ways I feel like, as we have seen with a lot of the way that Supreme Court cases for civil rights have been focused, very narrowly on a single sympathetic, easy to understand person and situation, I feel like a lot of the Me Too conversation has been very, very specific. You look at Harvey Weinstein and the beautiful women that he sexually harassed and assaulted, and it's clearly a workplace situation. And I think that for a broad audience who may not understand the contours of sexual harassment or whatever else, it is the kind of easy example that your grandmother could understand, kind of a thing. But what happens when you're in a situation like a gay bar where it is not an easy, clear-cut situation, where people, all of us in this conversation, we know when we go into a gay bar, I know from my past experience what might be waiting for me there.
All bets are off if you go into a gay bar. You can see and experience any kind of thing.
Right. So what is the choice for people? Do they just, if they don't want to be sexually harassed, do they just not go to a gay bar? Or is there some kind of solution to this kind of a situation?
Oh, I mean, there's lots of, I think, layers to this, right?
Right.
Well, because, I mean, again, I think, both Trevor and I, right, are going to be familiar with folks who are doing work, on, like, the closing of these kinds of so we think about gay bars or other kinds of gay spaces, right, like, as places for, kind of community building, not just to go and pick up somebody to have sex with, right? Like, it's supposed to be you being in community with your people.
There's
but,
that too, yeah.
Sure, okay.
Right, like, well,
I think we're going to a bar for different reasons, Shanetl.
No. Look, I'm going to shake my ass. That's what
Sure.
I'm getting drunk and I'm shaking my ass. That's my reason. Now, what I'm saying, though, is, like, there's been, I think, a lot of, like, kind of, lamenting all of these lesbian bars, right, kind of closing. And really, like, if we're getting any kind of resources for any kind of gay space, queer space, it's mostly kind of bars that really prioritize really gay men, not so much queer women.
Right.
And so, it's not only, right, kind of controlling who gets to actually go and pick up people. I mean, I'm thinking about the little baby queers who, are still trying to figure out who they are. And so, these spaces do feel like these kind of, amazing life-changing kinds of spaces. I mean, like, for me, the first gay bar I ever went to was actually Club Q in Colorado Springs. That's where I'm from. And so, when the shooting happened, I just had this, like, just huge, devastating,
Sure.
like, emotional reaction because, like, that's the first place I was going as, a fresh, 17, 18-year-old being in queer spaces. And I wasn't even necessarily really, like, out,
Right.
but I knew that I felt good in those spaces. So it's again, like, I wasn't going to those spaces because I was trying to find somebody to go home with as, a 17 and 18-year-old. So I get that we're all not necessarily all going there for the same place, but I do think that there are people who are going just because they want to feel a part of something.
Well, and also freedom. I mean, a big part of it is a comfortable space, because I think even about straight women who go to a gay bar, that what they're looking for is a place where they can feel uninhibited, but also they're not as worried that straight guys are prowling their boobs, whatever. I mean, it might not be great that gay guys are trying to motorboat you or whatever, but I frequently have been in gay bars where the women there are sexually harassing me, because they feel like, oh, this is a safe space for me to get a little wild because I know it's not going to get out of control. Like, I will always be in control of how far this is going.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that point about like, the straight women harassing gay men as well, right? Because, the idea that like, he couldn't be possibly interested. So like, I have, the ability to kind of objectify him without him potentially like responding in violence or assuming that I want to have sex with him.
Right.
But again, that's so, that's so voyeuristic, and it is reducing, right, queer people to these like kind of pieces of entertainment for straight people. And I get why people don't want straight women in the club anymore.
So there's a lot going on here, basically.
I don't mind those straight ladies as long as I can have sex with them. But, that's just me.
I mean, honestly, like, but again, like, to me, this is not limited to the gay bars. Like, I go to straight bars and women are groping me and feeling me up as well. They want to dance with me and take pictures and all. Like, for me, I'm having those experiences anywhere. So it's
Shanetl is right, because now that I think about it, whenever I go out with the straight ladies, they're always rubbing up on me in way inappropriate ways, and I'm like, ladies, it's not like I get to have sex with you. Why are you doing this to me? Now you're just teasing me.
I think this energy wants an outlet, and there's, it's not something that can be done with straight guys safely. So the energy needs to go somewhere.
We need to bring Trevor in here. What are your thoughts?
Yes.
Trevor?
Yeah, Trevor.
Well, no, I think this is great and such an important conversation because part of the book is really about what can queer people do better. And obviously, bars are such a site where our community comes together that it's often the focus. We talk also about like bathhouses and, I think some of the essays talk about how the bathhouses can be really liberating when you want to go into a space where there are different rules of engagement where, with a wink and a nod, you can express interest and start having sex with someone without any verbal communication whatsoever. And some people really value that. And then, there's another essay in the book that I'm thinking about where someone sort of talks about how the first time they went, they didn't really know the rules. And so, they wish that there would have been more explicit kind of communication about how consent is done and how it's not done in those spaces. So I do think we have these different spaces where there are different rules of engagement, where consent can still happen, even without verbal communication. But of course, there still needs to be some kind of baseline for how you say yes to the dress or whatever. And I think we can do better, but we've also we gay men have a lot more sex than the average heterosexual person generally. So on average, we have some expertise, I think, to offer.
Yeah. But to Shanetl's point about younger people going to bars, their first experience, they don't know necessarily what to expect when they get there. Just like you had said, it's not just with bathhouses. I mean, even in a gay bar, if you're, 21, 22, and you're finally, inching out into a gay bar scene, you don't know where your own personal limits may be yet. And certainly you're getting into this environment where there don't seem to be a lot of rules, and you may not feel, I can really speak up here and say what I want or don't want.
Well, and given the state of like sex ed in this country, like they may not even know the parts of their bodies that like could be pleasurable in any way.
I mean, there's so much truth to what you just said. So I'm a huge sex ed advocate, and I am always floored by how little sex education we provide in this country from either our parents or in school. Like, it is so lacking. It is ridiculous. At this point, I'm just grateful for shows like Sex Education on Netflix, because at least there's some sex ed that's actually positive that's happening in the world in an entertaining way that people can digest. But it's shocking to me how little sex ed we have in this country.
It's an embarrassment.
Trevor, you were starting something there.
Yeah, no, I mean it's an embarrassment, and that's part of what my essay is about. It's just like, how do you learn what you like when you live in a world where they don't give you any tools to understand what you're quote unquote into? I mean, like as a gay man, for example, you know, when you're on the apps for the first time online and someone asks if you're a top and or a bottom, you're like, what the hell is that? You don't know. You certainly didn't learn that in school.
Right.
So there's a lot of sort of blind feeling around for queer people as they start to become sexual, and that's kind of different than what it's like for straight people.
Right. Well, I mean, and in some ways, it's good because you get to try a lot of different things and see what you like. The other side of it is there's a lot of trial and error along the way.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of I thought this would be fun, and then it turns out I was like, meh.
There's a lot of bad sex in life.
Yes.
For sure. Yep.
Certainly early on.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that is a unifying experience for the straight and the non-straight.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I guess there's not really a lot of way around that, because certainly with sex, because before I started having sex, I thought in my head, oh, I might like this, whatever. And it's not that it was like traumatizing or something when I tried it, but I was like, this isn't really, it turns out this was not what I thought it was going to be. You know, like you see a trailer for a movie, like that looks fun, and then you watch the movie, and you're like, oh, it turns out this movie was not as fun as I thought it would be. So, you know, there is a certain amount of that is going to take place, and there is no other way around it. You kind of have to try it once if it looks interesting to you and see how it goes. But you know, it's a lot of bumpy roads along the way.
Yeah.
I opened my essay with this story that a mentor told me, where back in the 70s he started having sex as a gay man, and the guy he hooked up with was someone, you know, he knew from his own personal life. All they knew was Vaseline was involved, so they just covered themselves in Vaseline and just like rolled around to see what would happen.
What?
And
That's
that just speaks to like how ill-equipped sometimes we are the first time.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was a lesbian that grew up in Wyoming with two very, very heterosexual parents who had 8 children. So,
they were very heterosexual.
Let me tell you, I knew nothing about lesbian sex when I first started. I mean, nothing. I knew nothing, but I figured it out.
You know, so this is funny because I'm like thinking back, and again, my parents weren't necessarily super explicit about sex, and we didn't have super in-depth at school. But I remember one of my mom's close friends were a couple of lesbians, and they used to babysit us all the time. And as I got a little bit older, one of them, I mean, Cheryl was a total pillow princess and like proudly told me that. I remember like she would sometimes like say these like little snarky things to me that like I think in retrospect really can like think about what she was saying to me. I don't know if at the time if I really knew what she was talking about.
That's funny. Yeah, my poor child, because I am so sex forward and talking about sex. So I have a 15-year-old at home, and Romy knows so much about sex because when we're with our friends and Romy's in the room, we don't censor ourselves at all. Like we talk very openly about what's good in our sex lives, what's bad in our sex lives with our friends, and they tell us the same. And I when I think about how much my child has heard just being in the room, I'm like, wow, Romy has gotten a really good sex education.
As opposed to Romaine when she was growing up, and the sex education she got was her parents not closing the door when they were having sex in the afternoon.
God, horrible. Horrible. Yeah.
It worked out just fine, apparently. Okay. We talked a lot about sort of our internal stuff here within our community. But Trevor, I know you've also written a lot about sort of the external forces, pressing against LGBTQ people, societal expectations, but also the criminalizing of homosexuality and the criminalizing of sex work and all of these things. So how do you think that these outside pressures factor into the way that queer people interact with each other?
Yeah, when I tell my students that when I started becoming sexually active in North Carolina, it was a felony, they're like, what? It's like
Yeah.
such recent history that in many states, sodomy was still on the books as a crime. And that lives with you. You know, it really leaves a mark in the way that you think about what this is and how taboo it is and how secretive, you know, you want to be about it. And so I think, luckily, Lawrence versus Texas, you know, prevented the prosecution of gay men and anyone from having non-normative kind of consensual sex. But the legacy kind of is still in our minds, I think, for people who lived through that. And certainly also talk about the criminalization of HIV, which still exists to this day in some states where, you know, people living with HIV are prosecuted, you know, in many cases for doing nothing wrong, just that they couldn't get the words, they couldn't just find the words to disclose their status, but that they might have used a condom or they might have had a viral load that was undetectable, and so, you know, they weren't able to transmit the disease to a partner. We live in a world generally, I think, where criminalization is often kind of a ghoul haunting queer people in some way, either in the present or in the memory of the past. And it just kind of is this like shroud that hangs over us, I think, that we have to navigate, and we all find our kind of own way through that. I think for me, you know, I think it just left this mark that it was wrong. You know, I was doing something wrong, and it was like equivalent to like robbing someone or something, you know.
But you also have written about this long history tying undesirable communities, especially minority communities, to disease and public health. That, you know, this is part of the othering of minority communities, whether it is the gay community in the 80s, but, you know, going all the way back to immigrants and other communities. They get othered by society as a solution to a public health problem. Like, well, we have to have them away from us because they're dirty and diseased.
Oh my gosh. The history of public health is full of examples of people pretending like the disease was someone else's fault. And it's usually someone who is of color or foreign or somehow marginalized. So, you know, HIV was originally gay-related immunodeficiency. And what did that communicate to the public, if not that it was because it was, you know, gay was the cause, that somehow, and I really thought this as a young person coming up, I just thought gay men could spontaneously get HIV, like it just like happened because, you know, when you're 14, you know, you don't really have a strong understanding of epidemiology. And that's kind of how I understood it at first, was just that it's a spontaneous thing. Spanish flu, I think syphilis in history was called, like the Italians called it the French disease, the French called it the Italian disease. Everybody wants to blame it on somebody else.
Everything old is new again.
Yes.
Exactly.
Well, or if they want to, you know, if they do decide they want to try to understand it better, then who is expendable? So with syphilis, you get, you know, the experiments on those men in Tuskegee. When it's, you know, testing out different kinds of birth control, you're testing it on Puerto Rican and Black women, right? Like, so it's also like part of this is also thinking about not just who is framed as the disease, but also who can we test things out on to protect white, you know, structurally, you know, right, empowered people from, you know, disease or illness, and you know, who can we, you know, sacrifice, you know, for that. So it's, I think all of those things dovetail together.
What I think is so fun is that it's always the same old thing. Like it gets dressed up a little bit. There's a catchy new buzz phrase around it or something, but the playbook never really changes, does it?
Amen.
Well, you know, there's a reason why Bell Hooks, you know, we live in a, you know, a white supremacist, hetero capitalist patriarchy.
Because it just never really
All
changes.
roads lead back to that.
Oh, the fun.
But, I mean, as sociologists, I mean, do you kind of feel like when new movements come about, do you kind of feel like when you look back in history, it's like this is exactly the same thing? And because I feel, being a member of the gay community, that we keep thinking, oh, we've made all this progress. Isn't this great? We made this progress, and then, like in a horror movie, it's Halloween 10. Like, again, he's out again. How is this possible that we thought that we had vanquished this villain and they pop up again and we're in an endless horror sequel?
Yeah, the drag queen panic happening right now is just unbelievable and yet totally believable. It's like, it just feels, is this the 90s? Like, did I take a time machine back in time?
Seriously.
Like, what? How did they become the villain? But it's happening, and it just speaks exactly to that point that where those stigmas live, if they're not rooted out, they're going to rear their head violently. In this case, especially, it is frustrating. Sociologists, we know it can be depressing.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think part of. I mean, there's that whole adage of history repeating itself. But I don't know if it's so much that it's repeating itself so much as the things that allow these things to happen are never actually dismantled. We're trying to alleviate some of the problems because, like, oh, well, now we've made some policy because society accepts you a little bit more now. But again, all you have to do is strike up another panic and people will rescind that support. So now, I mean, just the idea that a queer person exists near a child, is contaminating. We can't have trans girls playing sports because they'll unfairly beat the real girls, but nobody ever seems to be complaining about trans boys.
Yeah.
It's all in, again, like saying, putting these, kind of biologicalizing around what it means to be a girl, also reinforces other ways in which they can control women's bodies. So like all of these things are together. And if, people give in at one point, they're effectively feeding ground to much kind of bigger umbrellas of issues.
Well, and I feel this way actually about the trans girls in sports, because I feel like this really opened the door to these drag queen bands. And I remember early on when there was all this discussion about trans athletes, there were a lot of gay people that I knew who really felt like, oh, well, this is not our issue. This doesn't affect us. This isn't about us. And I think that this happens a lot in the LGBTQ community, especially around trans people and gender, because frequently, as a community, to move faster, we will drop trans people in a split second to get where we need to go. But I feel like these drag queen bands have really highlighted the danger of that as a strategy. You think you're moving faster, but all of this is you're towing it behind you. It's not, you're not getting away from it. It's still there, even if you think you're running away.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think when we're talking about, again, who are the ones that can be sacrificed? I mean, I think it's important, not just, I think, I'm thinking about all of like the other kinds of marginalized populations that tend to be overrepresented among trans folks. So, people of color, especially among young, people who identify as trans. There's so all these. It's upsetting on a whole number of levels. But I'm just thinking about we're willing to throw certain people under the bus.
Yeah. Because
trans issues aren't our issues, or those people aren't the same. They aren't my people. And I think, the more that I think we kind of subscribe to that kind of thinking, again, we're just ceding ground for them to attack people of our group, right? People we do consider our in-groups.
Go ahead, Trevor. Sorry.
Well, I'm just reminded of when I interned at a gay organization way back when in Massachusetts, and the Lawrence versus Texas decision came down, striking down sodomy laws, and we held a big rally. And my boss, who worked for the organization, sang the sodomy song from Hair with someone from a local theater, and the gay marriage people were pissed because we had talked about sex.
Right.
And that, to me, is another example, like, you know, the gay movement has a long history of snipping out things that, you know, are controversial or involve people that are not like white, either elderly lesbian couples or rich white gay men. Anything else, well, it doesn't, it's not on message. That's literally what they said. The song wasn't on message.
Yep. I know how that works.
Well, Danielle Moody, who we used to work with, she said something that has stuck with me for years that I thought was really powerful. And she said that, you know, when you compromise, you have to ask who gets left behind or who gets left out. And I think that this is a big part of the conversations that we need to have within our community, but also just generally in our society. It's fine. Sometimes we make compromises to move ahead, but it is really important to make sure that the compromise is not a decision to willfully leave a segment of our community behind, you know, in order to do that.
Amen.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are very short on time, and but I did want to tell you very quickly this lesbian story. So I used to work at AOL in the 90s and plan it out, and but when I worked at AOL, we did the gay stuff, and we got a message from another site that was about books, like a book club, an online book club. And they had noticed in their statistics that they suddenly had a huge number of users who had gone into a very obscure message board on their site. And all of a sudden they had all this traffic and they couldn't figure out what it was. And then it turned out that it was lesbians who had colonized in this obscure book chat message group because they were basically trying to avoid straight men pretending to be lesbians online. So they had sort of verified lesbians. They all knew each other. And then they would create like a commune somewhere in the internet and then hang out there and chat with each other. And then once an interloper found them, they would pack up and move on to another corner of the internet that they could create a safe space in. And so like they were on this book site and then one day they were just gone. And somebody had found them, and they kept moving.
That's hysterical.
I know. But I thought, Shanetl, especially given your long studies of the internet and everything, I thought you would enjoy that as an anecdote.
I mean, sometimes I'm like, wow, I feel like such an uninformed queer. It's like it's, you know, because I mean, I didn't really I think really kind of come out until I was like a grad student. I mean, I was still running in like queer spaces as an undergrad, even to an extent, maybe as, you know, like kind of a teenager, but like, I didn't identify myself, you know, as a bisexual. I wasn't having sex with women until I was like a grad student. So it's like, I feel like sometimes there's just like something I missed. And I'm like, I feel like I'm always kind of trying to catch up. I'm like, what is this queer culture that I of age should know, but seem to not know?
Book club.
Yeah, well.
And lesbians. Who knew?
It was a secret tribe of lesbians moving their way through the internet. But, I mean, I think it really speaks to they had a real need and they're, you know, for a safe space. And there just weren't any. And so they had to kind of make their own along the way. But it's kind of, you know, has a very The Last of Us vibe to it of, you know, we're being chased by zombies. We have to keep hiding out and always on the move. It's exhausting.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. You know, and I think that's for a whole host of things, you know, it's I mean, I think those of us who study, you know, race in any kind of capacity in academia are starting to feel like we're going to have to start forming, you know, little secret internet communities. So But I mean, I think that was kind of part of, I mean, I think as much as people, I think, want to talk about how toxic the internet is and how horrible it is, like that's part of what the internet is for, exactly what you're describing, like people being able to create these spaces and be able to have the kinds of control, right, that you can't maybe have in, kind of in-person places.
Right.
And there's reasons why, particularly thinking about like dating, for folks who are not in major cities that have, big queer spaces or whatever, like don't have gay bars for you to go cruise, you need those internet spaces to find the other queers because it may not be safe for you to, kind of look for them in public.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think there's still elements of that. But then there's also this weird, kind of like gatekeeping thing that there's actually some folks I know who are like working on a project about this now, like kind of like why people, like younger people are like not identifying as lesbians anymore. And so like, and then also, right, that also dovetailing, I think, with, right, the kind of anti-trans stuff, this idea that like you could just be a butch lesbian, but now, the culture says you have to transition and be a man. And I'm like, there's plenty of butch lesbians. Like,
yeah, sure are.
like we're not, they're not dying out.
Well, I think, the main thing is, these internet spaces aren't perfect. These gay bars aren't perfect. But, it's good to have the conversations. And there are upsides to uninhibited spaces for our community of pockets of connection through the internet. And I'm glad you guys are furthering this conversation through your work.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You bet. All right. Our thanks to Shanetl Gabrieal Buggs for being with us. PhD, Dr. Shanetl. I'm sorry, I didn't call you Dr. Moore. I meant to because Megyn Kelly is very upset about people who are not medical doctors being called doctor, except, of course, for her father, who was a professor. Anyway, and then Trevor Hoppe as well, editors of Unsafe Words, Queering Consent in the Me Too Era. It's out everywhere. Books are sold and available February 10th. Please pick up a copy.
Yes.
Support their delightful work here in keeping this conversation going. We appreciate you both being with us.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
Oh, and if you check out our social media, we have discount codes for the book. So if people want it cheaper, we all love a sale.
Awesome. Well, we love a good deal, so we'll let our listeners know.
All right, good. Thanks so much. This episode is over, but the fun is just getting started. Check out more of our show and all the shows in our network at dnrstudios.com. And don't forget the DNR Cast app, available now for iPhone in the App Store.